Murdaugh appeared before Judge Richard Gergel today and admitted the theft of the money he's been accused of. He's been totally cooperative and apologized to the victims of his theft. This is, we believe, the first step for him in putting this behind him. He did not argue with a single fact. He did not argue, attempt to push back on any allegation by the federal government. So we're pleased to report that Alec feels good about this, and obviously he's going to be sentenced for it. And it'll be substantial time, but he's willing to accept that. Any questions?
Did you restate what you said at the beginning? I think a couple people were wrong there.
What? What did he say?
Once you repeat the beginning.
Which part?
About admitting.
No. Anything else?
What's next Saturday?
Lunch. So in the federal system, they do a pre-sentence report. It takes a month, two. We'll get it. If we believe they incorrectly assessed the sentencing guidelines or other aspects, we get to object. Then the government gets to respond. Then the judge only determines what the appropriate guidelines are and what the appropriate sentence is.
I will say this, that there's been a lot of sneering and skepticism about, does Alec have a drug addiction? And so Judge Gergel and the probation office who does a pre-sentence report will be given all those records, and they will make a determination as part of the sentencing. And so that'll be a big part of the sentencing hearing, is what was the scope of his drug addiction.
How would you describe the negotiations with the government to reach this plea deal?
Multiple meetings in prison with Alec. Holy shit. I mean, y'all want me to wait?
Do not ask for whom the bell tolls.
Because it tolls for thee. Yeah, right. Okay, is that going to stop in a minute? It's only 11 o'clock.
It's 11 times. Yeah.
11 times for 11 o'clock, yes.
Y'all want me to go ahead or you want me to wait?
There we go.
Okay, there we go. What was the question?
I was asking you how you describe the negotiations with the government.
Very lengthy, just going to do this 11 times?
3, yeah, 8 more times.
I assume y'all want me to wait.
Please.
Monk, you got time? We got to wait for that ring 11 times.
All the time in the world.
You think?
I hope you weren't eager to get to lunch too soon.
We're eager to get to lunch and then get back to Columbia. Who's going to CrimeCon this weekend?
That's right.
You are.
John Monk's
Oh,
going.
yeah. Monk's going.
Are you going to CrimeCon?
Creighton's concert's tonight, isn't it?
It's
Tonight.
We're missing Creighton's.
Okay, I think you're good.
Okay. Tell me the question again.
How do you describe the negotiations with the government to reach this plea deal?
Very lengthy, a number of meetings at the prison with Alec, which is not easily reached. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, and I'll defer to Jim on this because he handled 99% of this. I was at some of the meetings, but Jim's a former federal prosecutor and as a result has a wealth of knowledge about this process that I don't have.
I mean, the fact of the matter is the government didn't give up a lot in the plea agreement. I mean, we're pleading to all the counts he's charged with. And in lieu of a reduction based on his cooperation, you know, he's getting a recommendation that whatever sentence he receives here will be concurrent to his anticipated state sentence for the same offenses. It was important to the government before they entered into a cooperation agreement that they were comfortable with what information he had. So we spent, you know, many days, 3-4 days, you know, with agents going through everything from A to Z. And so they had a level of comfort, we had a level of comfort, and but whatever sentence he gets is up to Judge Gergel, and no one can bind him, and neither one of us tried.
How do you feel about him taking a polygraph test?
I mean, you know, that's up. He's agreed in plea agreement to sit down and take a polygraph if asked. And whether they'll ever ask, I don't know. But, you know.
What's going to happen November 27th when he appears in state court? Will he plead guilty?
That's two things. We're not answering that question, number
You're not
one.
answering
Number
that
two, well, we will on November 27th. That's, you gotta wait, John. And number two, and the most important thing is, we've got serious questions about whether that trial ought to go forward on November 27th, and we'll be filing the appropriate motions at the appropriate time to deal with that.
How's Alex feeling about having this part?
I think he's relieved. I think he's, honestly, there's two things Alex will tell you. One, he stole the money. Two, he did not kill Maggie and Paul.
And three, he's admitted stealing the money since he was first confronted in September of 2021 by his law
Never
firm.
denied it.
How does the defense respond to the state's accusations that there are significant factual disputes in your request for a new murder trial?
Well, you see, that will be litigated, not at the Court of Appeals, but when the Court of Appeals orders a hearing on this, we'll deal with that. We think that we have a very, very strong case that he ought to be given a new trial based on jury tampering.
Sorry to
The state said
interrupt
they
this
gave you
with a
10
procedural
days
question.
to correct any disputes that were in that initial appeal. Are you planning to file anything?
Tomorrow, we will be filing a response to the Attorney General's.
Thank you.
Mr. Barber here has been working on it diligently, and tomorrow, right?
Unless you want to file it today.
We could file it today, but we'd all have to get back to Columbia, and we got lunch.
Just for clarity's sake, that last motion regarding the forfeiture, audio was very low for a lot of us in the overflow room. Could y'all go over what happened with that?
Phil, why don't you? Phil's our forfeiture expert.
Very simply, as part of the federal charges, there's an allegation in the indictment for forfeiture of funds, and then in the plea agreement, there is an agreement to not contest forfeiture. And the rules of procedure in federal court, the next thing that happened would be what's called a preliminary order of forfeiture for the government to take the money. And then there's a process about claims on that money and that sort of thing. And what we did was simply ask for the order, for the preliminary order to issue immediately to avoid the possibility of, or the almost certainty of dissipation of the assets and some of the civil proceedings that appear to be imminent.
How much is in that, in the receivership? How many?
You'd have to ask Mr. John T. Lay that question.
But it's 7 figures.
Do you believe your client would be able to pay that, considering he hasn't been able to pay his bond in the past?
So the money is under, his assets have been seized and they're in a receivership account as a result of this from the receivers, Mr. Lay and Mr. McCoy. As a result of this federal order, our expectation is the federal government will go in and take that money as they're entitled to, and then that will stop all the bleeding, all the attorney's fees attached to those funds, and there will be more money for the victims. And you know, that's all the money he has, and there is no other money. And right now, you know, the burn rate on attorney's fees coming out of that money is
Hundreds of thousands of dollars
yes,
so far.
Didn't you also request attorney's fees out of that money?
We did, but we won't be asking it from the federal. We've just basically negated our request for attorney's fees.
How do you think the state's going to respond to this?
Not well.
Ms. Limehouse says this is the first she heard about that part of it, about is she aware that the DOJ could be seizing these assets?
Did you
had
talk
a
to her about it?
conversation about that?
I'm not going to contradict Ms. Limehouse. I don't know what she knew or didn't know. There's a separate forfeiture division at the United States Attorney's Office, and that's who's in charge of going and grabbing money.
And let me just say too that what happened with that motion today was not a surprise in terms of the forfeiture. That's in the documents. We're simply pressing for it to happen as quickly as possible. So it's a timing thing. She was always going to take the money. We're asking for it to be taken now to prevent hundreds of thousands of dollars from being lost in the near future.
You mentioned that there was an issue with Alex getting some of the plea agreement at the jail. Can you clarify what you meant by that?
You know, I don't want to get in an argument with the prison, but I mean, he's having a difficult time hanging on to his documents in his cell. Things get seized, and not returned to him. So we're frustrated.
We're gonna be in the near future talking to the Department of Corrections about making sure he has the ability to have his legal documents with him and the ability to communicate with us about those legal documents by phone.
Would you say the goal today was to go to federal prison as opposed to in-state prison?
You know, that's it is now an option, but it's nothing that we have control over. So I mean, it's
Anything else?
Is that why you're pleading guilty
No.
in federal court,
No.
but heading to trial
No.
in state?
No.
One last thing, you mentioned that the feds didn't concede on much in the negotiations. What did they concede on?
Can you come back closer to the
that
microphone?
I mean, they agreed that they would recommend at sentencing that any federal sentence he receives would run concurrent to any state sentence he receives. So.
Thank you.
Okey doke.